Good evening. Welcome to Investigator News, and this is the Ww3 Report. William, how you doing today? I know me and you kind of, we, I think both of us took too long of naps.
I'm lost in space.
Lost in space. You know, I watched that last night, the movie. I seen it a long time ago, but we rewatched it just because we were looking for something to watch. And the kids hadn't seen it, and the kids were just amazed. And I said,
Warning, Will Robinson. Warning, Will Robinson.
yeah. And I told the kids, it used to be a show, and they were like, "Really? Is it as good as the movie?" I said, "Well, no, it's one of them '60s, '70s corny things." Was it like the original Star Trek? Yeah, well, kind of. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I don't think they want to watch the original series. So I want to start off tonight with this, and there's not a whole bunch of media doing this. And if it wasn't for one of the officers speaking at the press conference this morning, I wouldn't have this wouldn't have hit me hard, but it did. And we're talking about Vegas, the 10 kids that beat this poor 17-year-old to death, youngest being 13. And there's a hatred brewing. Um, Now, it was all over earbuds and a vape pipe or vape, whatever the thing is. Something that can be replaced, but they killed this kid, and his wounds were so bad that um, basically his brain was mush from the autopsy, saying that uh, there was nothing left of his brain. And so I'm going to issue a kind of a warning because tonight's show is pretty vicious. Um, I should have put it up at the beginning, but just warning that the content tonight is very graphic that me and William are going to talk about. Now, so we're looking at this kid that was one punch was thrown, a second punch was thrown, and then the 10 kids jumped him and kicked his head and stomped on his head and beat him till his brain was just mush. There was not much left. It was jellied. Um, they're still looking for two of them, and uh, I can't even imagine the parents' reaction to the. And I'm talking about the kids that did this. That now they're going to be charged with murder. Now, what the police officer said that struck me, that hit me pretty hard, was there is a hatred in the schools right now that they'll get 10 of them. And how long has this been going on? Well, I had a family member that uh, out of Reno, and they would jump and beat up old people coming out of the casinos to steal. This wasn't about stealing. This was about someone stole something, and they were going to kill this kid over it. And so this has been going on a long time, but it went from just simple, let's knock over some old people and take their stuff that coming out of the casinos, to let's kill this kid. And there's a hatred. And he said, this this sounds a lot like what we are seeing with Hamas, that and these terrorist groups that teach their kids to hate,
Elly,
whether it's, hold on, racial or religious, or and it's also stemmed through the Middle East. And he said this is also what the Germans were teaching the young kids, of the hatred towards the Jewish people. So now he says now it's in the United States. Okay, go ahead, William.
so the alphabet crew, a lot of them are school teachers now, and they're teaching hate, right?
Mm-hmm.
If not just for uh, the alphabet crew, then it's for uh, like-minded folks like Black Lives Matter or Antifa or even Palestinian Palestinians, right? It's so hate for the Jews. So they're getting that in school. And, you know, one of the first things they do when they're in school is they listen to a news report by CNN.
Mm-hmm. Oh, they show CNN in the schools.
So you've got national news media coming in and instilling that and then being reinforced by the teachers.
Now, William, real quick, my grandson, he got in trouble and sent to the office because he refused to watch CNN. And he said that it promotes hate and it's fake news. And the teacher got very upset at him and sent him out to the office for it. But he was right. Was it, you know, and he was one out of 8 kids in that class that ended up following him up because one by one they were saying, oh, yeah, I was told it was fake news. And the teacher said, we'll move over to NBC. And then 3 or 4 kids just got up and said, we're going to go to the office because we're not going to sit here and listen to fake news. So we have a few kids that are standing up, but, you know, my grandson listens to me. So, you know, I may have gotten him kicked out that day. So go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, so that very thing's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And sides are being chosen, right? They're instilling a choice in the children. It's not like we're all students. We're all trying to learn together. No, it's you have to choose sides with our biased groups. And now keep in mind, a lot of these groups are private, government-private partnerships, right?
Funded, yeah.
Public-private partnerships that are funded by the government and move that propaganda right into the schools.
Yeah.
Now, then there's something else going on I want to talk to you a little bit
William,
about.
isn't this exactly what the Nazis did with their kids? It's almost like,
Yeah, so they had groups called the Hitler Youth.
yes, that's, I
Hitler
couldn't think of the
Youth,
name
it was
of it.
like Boy Scouts for Hitler to get ready to be in the military for the boys, right? And for the girls to be able to procreate and create the next Aryan race, right? Yeah. And so they're all trying to get in best physical shape. The girls learning defensive tactics, the boys learning offensive tactics. And this is what they taught to the younger children.
Mm-hmm. And now we're seeing it here. Now now I know you mentioned before the show of we're finding terrorist groups here in our country.
Yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but yeah, I've got a report that's pretty damning.
And so
it's not like there may be something here. There is something here, and so we'll just talk about that a little later.
And so, you know, when we look at terrorism, folks, our first exposure, when I looked into it, and it was through the FBI that did a big report, our first exposure really of terrorism was through ISIS when they were beheading journalists. And I believe that they were at Lebanon and Damascus. And so after they had went through Iraq into Syria, and then they got a hold of these journalists, and it showed beheadings. And then we started seeing these terrorists that were going town to town, and ISIS is very vicious. And what it did is it opened up to, now 9/11 did expose Al-Qaeda, Taliban, and we started getting into it. But the terror of these terrorists, folks, I want to stress this. It's about fear. The more brutal, the less morals they have, the worse that they could do, like burning babies. Caution and warning on content that I'm talking about. Beheading babies. It puts the fear. It's the fear of the people. And the people as a whole will say, oh, no, let's not let them do that. Let's talk about a ceasefire. Let's talk about this. Let's give them something so that they won't be so vicious. I'm sorry, these are terrorists. FBI has got a big report on terrorism on their site. So does the State Department, the Department of Defense, and all of them, the Pentagon, on terrorism. And they all are saying the same thing. If they can make you fear, you're going to back off. It's the fear.
Well, they do two things with fear. One is they get you to retreat. The other is they turn your brain off to be able to logically think through the situation. Because once fear is instilled in the brain, it's fight or flight. You don't have any logical thought processes beyond just basic survival. And so they want to instill that not only in the people at large in the world, but also their own people. This is the way they control their own people through fear.
And cartels do this too.
And the other thing they do is they get their message out to the world. And so they find sympathizers throughout the world as well.
That's right.
And so it's a PR. It's really a PR campaign more than it is anything else. Although it looks, and is heinous. The reason they do it is part of war is deception. And this is a way of being able to fight against whoever you want to fight against using the press as your tool rather than having the press be the tool of, like the United States trying to suppress ISIS. And by the way, both Hezbollah and Hamas have been flying the ISIS flags. And when we had protests in New York, we had some individuals flying the ISIS flag. So that's interesting.
Okay, so I don't want to get too much into it because me and William could talk about the things that ISIS has done or Al Qaeda, and as we have talked about before, a lot of these terrorist cells and these groups that are being trained not only in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, and there was and I just want to go through this quickly because Pakistan, now the news there, I found out from a gentleman that has been writing me on how bad the news is censored over there. So it's really hard to get stuff out, but we're finding out there was 19 attacks. One of the head, how I took it, and William could probably help me get through this one. One of the head terrorists was arrested, and he went before the courts over in Pakistan. Now, this gentleman in Pakistan, if you could write me on this or put in the comments what you know about this, it would help because you know more of the real situation than we're getting that is torn apart by censorship of Pakistan. And there's been 19 killings, and it's main people that are part of this investigation. And there is also 2 different terrorist groups there that are also trying to pick off one another. And so Pakistan is a rise of terrorism to the country. William, do you have anything to add to that? Because I got an article on it, but I don't really trust it.
Let me explain first the politics in Pakistan. Pakistan had a president, but during the election, the opposite candidate declared that he wasn't a true winner. And finally, the military stepped in and said, look, we're going to control the government for a while until the civilians can get their elections together. So it is basically a military police state right now. All right, and they are in civil turmoil as far as electing their major offices. Now, with that is the backdrop. They have two major terrorist groups. One is the Taliban, and that's to the west and north in Pakistan. Pakistan's like a long, narrow country. So you go north up in Pakistan, a long ways from Karachi, and you end up with, on the west, the Taliban refugees that came over the border, came over the Khyber Pass during the Afghan war with the United States. Now, those people are being evicted right now back to Afghanistan. And the reasons why that's happening is they have another group to the east and north. Now, in the northeast, they have Indian Islamic people of the mountains that don't like the Pakistani Islamics in that area right across the border, okay? And they've been fighting really for millennia. This is tribal. But now it's attached to states. And at the same time, in the east, northeast, China wants to bring a Belt and Road, a highway, basically crossed and down into Pakistan to the west and hooked to the Khyber Pass. So they have wheeled access from China through Pakistan into Afghanistan so they can take the minerals out of Afghanistan. And everybody is using these tribes that have been warring, modulating them to their own benefit. Well, now they've had some killings down in the capital, right? And they brought this guy that did a killing before the courts, and of course he was convicted. And it was a targeted killing. And so now the terrorist group, I believe, is what happened is they killed the judge that sentenced the guy that had done the killings. And so now we have this turmoil, and at the same time, the ISI, which is Pakistani intelligence, is trying to sort all this out. And keep in mind, in the ISI and in the military, you have people that are sympathetic to both sides, to all three sides. Yes. And so there's a little chaos going on. And to make it absolutely worse, that is like a flashpoint in the world, in the Northeast, because China, India, and Pakistan all have nuclear weapons.
Well, and not only that, but they're training terrorists. I mean, pretty much all of them have got camps in Pakistan and Afghanistan. I mean, we know Afghanistan is a terrorist country. And what they do
they have madrasas.
They have what?
They have religious schools. They have madrasas. They're radical Islamic schools to teach the Quran and teach the Prophet, right? And the most extreme views. At the same time, they're going through military training in this camp. So you have the camp, and then within the camp, you have a religious madrasa. And maybe like we might have a seminary or maybe a church or something within our military bases. Well, that's kind of what's going on there, except these are terrorist trainees. Yeah. And they come from all around the world.
Yeah. And the thing is, William, is like Pakistan, I found out just looking into terrorism, and Iran is boasting that Pakistan is one of the biggest grounds where ISIS-K came from. And they described, and this was an FBI report, that ISIS-K is the new generation, what we call the Generation Z here, would be ISIS is 40-year-olds and on up, because look how long ISIS has been around since we left Iraq. So that's decades. So now these guys are getting older. So ISIS-K was the new generation of ISIS. And there are more fierce. and more deadly. And they're all being trained in Pakistan. Pakistan is very well known as training the new recruits.
So they have all the information that has been learned by the adults, the older guys, are now being given to the younger generation, plus an even more virulent type of Islam is being taught in the madrasas. That's basically, if you die for the cause, you'll go to heaven, right?
Yes.
And so they're getting these kids ready to die for the cause, however they need them to do it. And in a lot of cases, these young people that don't have any other opportunities are just being set up.
You know, the other new thing I found out, William, was, you know, the whole Japan kamikaze. You know, the first to use it was Afghanistan.
Oh, yeah.
See, no one knew about that. We always thought it was a new thing that Japan did in World War II. No, it actually was started in Afghanistan, where they were teaching their pilots to do that. So yeah, everything is stemming from the Middle East and Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran over for decades.
So where this terrorism began was between the Irish and the English when they were fighting over Northern Ireland, okay? And there was the orange and the green. I can't remember which is which. One's Catholic, one's Protestant, and they were getting involved with terrorism. Well, the Palestinian Liberation Organization saw it and said, hey, I got an idea. Let's go and capture a whole bunch of Jewish people and take them to Africa, and we'll hold them hostage, right? And we'll get our people back from jail and whatnot. Well, then you had the raid on Entebbe. So this has been going on all the way back to, and you know, we didn't have these where the police has a special organization to deal with hostage takers, right? We didn't have the SWAT until the Palestinians went in and slaughtered the people who were competing in the Olympics in Germany. And when that happened, the police didn't have a reaction force really capable of dealing with that. Well, everybody around the world looked at what happened in Berlin and said, we have to create a special force. Well, that's where all the SWAT teams came from. And as an outgrowth of that, we had a lot more special forces being created, because when Israel sent out its best military people into this airport in Africa, Entebbe, and gathered up all their people after a brutal fight in the early hours of the night, getting them into C-130s and flying them out of Africa, right? Well, everybody said, we got to have that. Now, the United States had the SEALs and stuff like that, but not every organization had a special forces to that level. And after that, every country that could call themselves a country created SWAT-type forces to deal with terrorism. And this terrorism migrated from this fight between the English and the Irish, which they're getting along now, right? That's gone away. They have common trade. There's not violence going on anymore. But they learned it, right? And where did the English and Irish learn it from? Well, how do you think the United States won its independence initially? We didn't have a big continental army in the beginning. All we had was small force actions against their military, if you will. For us, we call them freedom fighters. For them, they would have called us terrorists, right? So this has been happening and rippled across the world. And we shouldn't be surprised when we see not just terrorism, but religion getting involved. Okay? So there was a big schism with Martin Luther between the Catholics and the Protestants, right? That's the biggest thing that happened in Christendom. Well, some of the same stuff's happening in Islam. And you've got the Shiites and the Sunnis trying to out-teach each other.
And they're calling this, and if you ask them over there, William, when the Palestinian or Hamas that they're capturing, they're saying people don't understand. This is the holy war. This is the holy war of all holy wars, and it's not about politics. This is a religious war in their eyes, and so they're fighting for Muhammad. They're fighting for the Quran. They're fighting for Muslim religion to be superior.
They're fighting for a Sharia superiority government over the entire world.
Mm-hmm. That's what they were. That's what they're taught. That's what they're taught in the Quran. That's the whole thing. Is people need to realize this is all written in the Quran, what they're supposed to do. And if you're not Muslim, you're not worth living. This is so hopefully you guys can start understanding of what's going on with this terrorism over in the Middle East. Well, we mentioned Pakistan and Afghanistan, Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, all of these terror groups all follow the Quran. This is the holy war of holy wars. And we keep looking at it as a political war. It's nothing to do with politics. And that's where Bibi Netanyahu understands of what's going on. And if in his view that he has to take them out. If they don't, they're only letting them build up and do something worse later.
So the Temple Mount in Jerusalem is holy to the Christians, the Jewish, and Islam. Islam seeks to drive both the Christians and the Jewish out. Now, we are part of the book, okay? So we're not complete infidels, but we have to pay indulgences to them, and then we're a lower part of the society. But anybody that's not part of the book, the Old Testament that they call it, not just the Quran, but the Old Testament is part of Islam as well.
Yeah, the first 4 books, I believe.
Yeah.
No, William, get this. To show you how that this has been going on a while. My brother-in-law was in Turkey, and he came back with some, I call horror stories, because if you in Turkey were to steal something, or over there in the Middle East, they cut your hand off. Then that way you can't steal. Sometimes both hands. It depends on the crime, what they chop off.
Yeah. It's part of Sharia. Now, jihad is part of Sharia, the law, okay? And jihad comes in many forms. It doesn't just come in terrorism and killing. Like we had just had in Washington, D.C., a big gathering to show support for Israel, okay? Jewish people all came to Washington, D.C. under heavy security. Now, they had the Palestinian supporters a few days before that, and so Israel wanted to show that they had supporters here in the United States as well, so everybody went. Well, guess what? The bus service between the hotel and the Washington, D.C. International Airport is contracted out of Detroit. And guess who are the bus drivers? Well, they're calling in sick. They're doing everything they can do to isolate the Jewish people from being able to get to the airport. So that's jihad, just the same as killing, right? It's called resistance in any way you can.
Mm-hmm.
And we deal with it. We've seen a lot of things happen in the United States now. We can say it's Antifa, we can say it's Black Lives Matter, but inside that, okay, inside those groups, there's also this Sharia group, okay, and we see fires across Canada. We were seeing fires all over California. We haven't had fires in California for some reason, right? As soon as somebody said
it was always around the down around Bakersfield with the Santa Ana winds. That's I lived in California all my life, folks, and that was weird. Paradise burnt to the ground. A heavy fire that was not easily put out, and they were catching Antifa and others, some Muslims that were starting these fires. They did, but they're not going to put it on the news. Of course not.
Right. And now we've had food processing plants, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've had derailments in odd places. And now we've had not only the I-5 or
I-10.
I-5.
I-10.
Now we have I-10 in Los Angeles. So we had I-5 all the way on the East Coast. Now we have I-10 in Los Angeles. Well, why are these fires happening underneath these bridges and destroying? We've never had this before.
It's
not like this.
Disruption of transportation.
Yeah.
Or Mary is even kept up on the plants that have had explosions or fires or gas leaks or plant after plant after plant shutting down. And I think I talked on this last night that, they're cutting off our food source. They're cutting off the transportation.
China has now hoarded, I think, 40% of grain corn, and I think 60% of
I think
wheat
it's close to 400,000 acres. I believe it's either 200,000, and I didn't write down, shame on me, or it's either 200 or 400,000 acres next to military bases, to where they have taken over the farming industry. And weirdly enough, we've seen Bill Gates that was engaged in the farming industry because he bought a bunch of land. Is he the one selling it? We don't know. I couldn't find nothing on it. Rumors, okay, but I don't go with rumors.
China's buying our crops on the market, right?
Yeah.
And then it's coming out of all of our farms. It's going into these large barges that go down to New Orleans or up to the Great Lakes. They're transferred to ships. That food then goes to China and is warehoused in China. So the rest of the world doesn't have access to it anymore. China is hoarding food from the rest of the world.
Well, I think, I always say they have a trial run, or they learn it, or they use a past experience. Now, during Japan, after what we did, they were allowing Japan to come over and get our trees. And what they did is they had boats that would process them, and they'd turn around, they'd pick them up in a certain spot, go out to the Pacific Ocean and bring it back into San Francisco and sell us the boards, the finished product.
Right. It's easier to have it milled offshore and come down the Columbia River and in Oregon and Washington. It goes to China or it goes to Japan. They're turned into boards or furniture or whatever else, and then sold back to us.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of what we're doing is, they're over here and they're using our farms. They're taking it to their processing plants and finishing it, and then turn around and selling us the finished product. Same thing. They've
been doing that with beef for quite a while. We slaughter the beef here. We dress them right, freeze them, Then they go in refrigerated containers or thawed out, processed in meat packing plants in China, then sent back to us so we can eat it, at Walmart or wherever.
Yeah.
Because it's called offshoring.
Mm-hmm.
If you can, as a business, right, gain from doing something and have the negative part of the business turned over to another government, then that's what you'll do. We used to do that here in the United States, and then we had problems with pollution, right? And so the EPA got on these businesses. Well, the businesses said, well, we can't export our problems from our processing in the United States, so we'll just go to China and export our problems from processing to the Chinese government. See? And China said, hey, this is a good strategy. We can use this to bring down the great American empire by just processing all their raw goods and taking away their jobs.
That's it.
Because China knows what the rest of the world knows is the United States is the industrial powerhouse of democracy throughout the world. And anything you can take as far as manufacturing from the United States, you weaken the United States. For the United States to be a superpower, we have to be dominant in oil, we have to be dominant in manufacturing, and we have to be dominant in raw goods and medicine. If you don't have those things, you can't win a long, protracted war.
And that's kind of like what we see with APEC and this meeting that Biden and Jinping is having. What people don't understand, folks, this isn't just a meeting with Joe Biden saying, China, you can't do this, you can't do that. This is an APEC meeting, and APEC is production,
it's
economic.
Asian Pacific. It's an Asian Pacific production community. I forget, producers, something like that.
Economic. It's just economic too. So what they're deciding is, and then Yellen even went over there, and what was Yellen's big thing is, you know what? We need to let China, we need to work with China and let them grow globally on the economic front. Me and William both think that she's full of crap. I'm going to say it for you. So that's what this is about, folks. Don't think he's going over there saying, oh, you can't send over a spy balloon. You can't send fentanyl. That's not what this is about. And the media, I think, is too damn scared to say something because they know it's an economic pack.
So this APEC meeting they basically invited themselves into the United States and San Francisco. Gavin Newsom was recalled to whatever we want to however we want to look at it, to China. And so this thing was set up in China, and then Gavin comes back. Now he's cleaned up all of San Francisco. He's tried to get rid of the protesters because Xi doesn't want protesters here. And 17 other countries from the Asia Pacific, right, economic group are coming to San Francisco. Well, it used to be you couldn't come into the United States without an entry visa from the State Department and have one of these meetings. I don't understand how this is all happening, that California can take over U.S. foreign policy. That's like, isn't that a violation?
William, we know that California has got,
and at the same time, Kerry, the climate czar, just signed a deal with China on climate.
Oh, yeah, they're not going to listen. But William, you got to realize with California, there is so much China business in California. It's only logical that he would call Newsom over, discuss what he wanted, and we discussed this before the show. China's like, you know what? We're communist. We don't want to see the crap on your streets. You're going to clean them up. You're going to do as you're told. And Newsom, yes sir, and bow bow. Yeah. And I think that's what we see, because China is, and we discuss this. People need to realize how narcissistic, egotistic Jinping is. And thinks that he is the superior power where we used to be. And he looks down on the United States as like a third world country now. So what he says is going to happen. And I think he basically didn't just invite Biden. I think he demanded Biden be there. And yes, sir, yes, sir. That's how I look at it. That's my opinion, William. Oh, did I lose you? I think I lost William. Oh, let me I'll get him back on the phone. So
I'm back.
Yeah. What'd you do? Did Jinping tell you to hang up on me and you listened? I'm teasing.
I don't know. Maybe Sally was chewing on the cord. She doesn't like that, a telephone.
So, that's my opinion though, folks. But that is what I seen happening before I left. I haven't lived in California since 1996. And I seen it turning very communistic. And no jobs, government rule, government laws, government coming down like in a communist, socialist way. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do this. But that's what APEC's all about, folks. Don't think he might have a meeting with Jinping over, hey, well, you shouldn't be doing things in the United States. And Z is not going to listen to him. He's the world superpower. He's the world superpower. All right, William,
at least in his mind. And also, they're having protests in California right now, and they're a little confused. So they're protesting Xi because of the genociding of the Uyghurs. At the same time, so they're having a die-in over that.
Mm-hmm.
Plus they're protesting capitalism, so the U.S. financial system, right? And then they're protesting communism because they have so many people here in the United States that are basically communist refugees. And also the communists are getting involved in the Asian lives. So there's a protest in California happening basically on that. They're kind of confused. They don't really know what side they're on.
Yeah, and then they're saying about Israel with genocide and hurting Muslims. So they're protesting for the Uyghurs, and they're protesting. It makes no sense.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Makes no sense. I did want to move over to the. Now I got this from my source over in Israel, and he said, "Did you know that we are sending ammunition and military equipment to Israel through the Pentagon?" And I said, "No, I didn't see no aid. Besides the aid we sent." He said, "No, check it out." So I run it through. And I found on military.com that the Pentagon is quietly sending Israel more ammunition, missiles, and for the campaign against Hamas. Not only that, but willing to send them military equipment through the Pentagon. Now you're saying, how'd that happen? How come we didn't know about that? Well, the Pentagon's got funding that they can use on different countries if needed. And that's what they're doing. So we don't think that we're not doing enough, because the Pentagon is quietly sending missiles as a campaign against the Hamas. So we're helping them.
We can fly in ammunition because we have airlift capacity in the United States. So the Air Force can be tasked with bringing in ammunition. But keep in mind that the United States already pre-positions weapons and ammunition in Israel. So we have basically a ammo dump there, right? So we just allow them to transfer out of our ammo dump into their ammo dump while they're involved in the war. Anything they don't use will be returned to our ammo dump. When they're done with our weapons, those will be returned to us. But for right now, the weapons that are in that region, right, are not being sent to Ukraine anymore. They're being handed over
Yes.
for use by Israel.
Right.
And what Israel's done with it, they'll go back to ammo dump and will likely be sending it back to Ukraine. So people think that weapons just go one way and they don't come back. Sometimes they actually do come back. And Israel's one of the groups that will be good with us. They have their own military, but if they get overstretched someplace, they'll look to the United States, and we should be a good ally of them. You know, if Israel wasn't there, we would have, at the United States, access to the Suez Canal. Israel is an offset to Egypt. If Israel wasn't there in the middle, we'd have less access to the Persian Gulf. We'd have less access to the Red Sea. Our use in the Eastern Mediterranean would be a lot less. We would have. It would be more difficult for us to transfer through the Sea of through the Malacca Strait and keep the South China Sea open to basically all these APEC people. Not, you know, we're not doing it for China. We're doing it for the other APEC people. And so they should think about all these other groups, how to help the United States. So when they get in a pinch, we can come in and help them. And we do all over the world because we have strategic interests in those places. Israel is a strategic interest.
Yeah.
Ukraine is not.
Now I know you had a report on Israel. What's going on with the hospital?
Okay, so in northern Gaza, Gaza's been basically cut into half. The northern part is really a third of Gaza, but the biggest hospitals are in the north, okay? And below those hospitals is where Hamas has put a lot of their command and control, their ammo dumps underground in tunnels. So this is asymmetric warfare against a nation that has aircraft and tanks, right, against a group that has shoulder-mounted missiles, and AK-47. So they use tunnels in their way. Well, they know that Israelis don't like to hit tunnels. They don't like to hit churches, for, you know, and in Gaza, that's they don't like to hit mosques, and they don't like to hit anywhere there's aid for the United Nations, UNHCR, or they don't want to hit children's schools. Well, Hamas decided to use that because they see that as being weak in thought. All right? Means that they're more determined they'll win in the end because the West is weak, because we're not willing to lose our children and our old people and destroy our hospitals and our infrastructure. Basically anything where the Red Cross goes, right, the Red Crescent goes, they see it as a weakness in the West. And so they put their command and control under these things. Israel didn't want to take out this hospital with bombs. Now, we could have put penetrators right through that hospital and deep into the ground, okay? We have the weapons to give to Israel to do that. They're called Moab. Anyway, so they went in room by room. Israel has. And not only have they gone into the hospital and rescued the staff from Hamas so that they don't have to be afraid anymore, right? They're not caught in the crossfire now because Israel is basically winning the war in northern Gaza, so they now have the protection of the Israelis. But Israel's also sending in the medical aid, bringing into the hospital, right? They're bringing in
baby
water,
formula and medical aid. Yeah,
they're bringing in medicine. They're bringing in medicine, and they're doing that at the same time in Israel. They've had to bring all the people from northern Israel and southern Israel into the center of Israel. So there's 250,000 displaced Israelis within Israel right now because of this war. And yet the Israeli people are sending in medications for, children that aren't theirs.
Mm-hmm.
The children, literally the children of the Hamas fighters, is who is Israel's trying to help their doctors help the Gazan citizens. So when we think about Israel as being evil and genociding, that's obviously not the case.
Yeah.
All right. When you send medicine to your enemies, you're not genocidal. All right. So there's no genociding of Gaza going on. Now there's going to be a different kind of control in the future because Israel can't tolerate being killed. Now, also, Hamas has come up with a temporary deal, a possible deal with Israel. They're going to release 50 hostages, women and children, if Israel will go on a 3 to 5 day military halt, right?
Mm-hmm.
And release any women or children that Israel has arrested and has in jails in Israel. So I don't know whether that ceasefire will work or not. I don't know if Israel will.
I don't think Netanyahu will go for that because it just, like we were talking on the phone, then they get a ceasefire and then it's like, let's end the war.
Keep in mind, the people of Israel they're desperate to get those hostages back. And so that puts a real rift in the government. That's a tough deal. So I'm not sure how it will shake out. I don't think they'll be willing to give them a 3 to 5 day halt.
Well, it was hours. They were talking just hours, and now they're talking 3 to 5 days. And Netanyahu, I've listened to him, and he just says, if we give them any more than an hour or two, all it's going to be is them a build up again, and then take over more hospitals and schools. And then you mentioned earlier when we were talking that all that does is, well, let's just end the war. Israel, you don't need to do no more damage. That to me, Netanyahu just is, and even Herzog, the president, I don't even think he'd go for it.
So anything that can stop in war, it's called momentum. You want to stop the momentum of your adversary. So Hamas will want a couple days, and then it'll be it'll start a couple hours and a couple days, and they'll want a couple weeks. And pretty soon, it's they want Israel to retreat from Gaza, and so they can win the global political propaganda war, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're using asymmetric warfare. They're using the United Nations against the West, right? They're using people in the West against their own governments.
Yeah, and then and then you kind of look at Ukraine, because of, I think 3 days ago, it was mentioned about everybody's sending everything to Israel right now, so no one is paying much attention to Zelensky and the Ukraine war. And he said he would consider a ceasefire if he could get back everything that Russia took. They back off and they don't attack them no more. And that ain't happening. So yeah, I think he did it for publicity, William. After I hung up with you earlier, to me that's what it sounds like, is him saying, "Hey, everybody's over there in Israel, and I still need more money." The other thing I heard was a lot of the EU and NATO is now looking at the corruption factor of Ukraine, that they didn't really know about. Now they're receiving reports of how corrupt Ukraine is, and that even Zelensky might even have a small part of it. So now they're looking at the corruption of Ukraine. So to me, it's they're starting to turn their backs on Zelensky. And I think he's going to have a hard problem, even though you said they just gave him some more aid.
Yeah, we sent them rounds for our tanks that were the super depleted uranium rounds that can penetrate enemy armor. Okay, so we sent
That's
that
what it was.
To Ukraine. Now, there's also been pressure on Zelensky, right, to negotiate. So Zelensky says, okay, I'll negotiate with them, and then demands that they give them everything, right? When Russia now looks at those provinces as part of Russia because they had a referendum of which side the people wanted to be on, right? And so that's a non-starter for the Russians. But know that there is pressure being put on Zelensky now to get this war either won, right, or make a decent negotiated ceasefire peace so that the rest of the world could go on, right? So I don't know what's going to happen, but as far as the
I don't even think the media is giving him any airtime. I mean, everything's been so much about Israel or this APEC meeting. I think that we're moving away from even supporting Ukraine because it's maybe a little bit on the corruption, but then you said, we sent lithium. Am I right? What was it? I didn't. What did we just send him?
We sent him depleted uranium rounds.
Depleted uranium. Okay. See,
yeah,
my whole thing is,
uranium.
What were we thinking? What the heck were we thinking? Doing that. That is, isn't that the start of nuclear war, nuclear heads?
Well, they were running out of standard ammunition, and so they have to come up with ammunition from someplace. So you just, once you get rid of the tungsten iron heads, the next place you go is to Ukraine. You go to depleted uranium warheads.
So,
because remember, we're have to send a lot of munitions right now to Israel, or transfer munitions to Israel so they can use in their howitzers, their cannons, if you will, so that they can keep Hezbollah to the north from coming into Israel while they're fighting Gaza in the south. This is, it's a big mess, and they need that for their artillery. But they can't use depleted uranium around Israel because that will bring in a world war with nuclear weapons. So because it's so tense, right? There can be no negotiation there. And so, we get stretched a little bit, and the Biden administration has accelerated manufacturing of warheads right here in the United States, but it's still not keeping up. Once they get done with these wars, they're going to be building back up for quite a while. We need to be on a war footing so that we can end up to China, but unfortunately we have gals like Yellen, whose husband is a award winner, Nobel Prize winner, economist from Berkeley, and she just wants to keep doing business with China, although making sure China doesn't get involved in businesses that affect our military readiness. The problem is all parts of your economy is part of your ability to produce during a time of war. And I think she is changing foreign policy without consulting, I don't believe, Congress or the White House.
Yeah. Now, the other thing, talking about missiles and stuff, is over in Taiwan, the Air Force is now deploying what they call Ching-Ting supersonic cruise missiles. Now, they were only getting them to go about 12,000 to 1,200 miles, and so they had been doing drills and exercises with them, and so now they came out and said that they're now proud because they can get a 2,000-kilometer range, and they could hit even north of Beijing. And I was telling William, this is kind of good news because it's showing that they're trying to build up their own force, and now they're creating their own missiles to sustain themselves. That's pretty much what I found out for Taiwan, that they haven't stopped training. They haven't stopped worrying. And not only that, but then we've had, I believe it was Lloyd Austin. He's starting to talk about all of these incursions that we are having with China. They're bumping, they're getting close, they're playing chicken, and said that, we might have to bully back, and we might have to do some close calls ourselves to show them that we're still in power. And
we don't have communication with the PRC's military. All right, that was cut off, and so there's no military to military information going back and forth.
Yeah.
During Syria, we called up Russia and stopped a big war from breaking out between the Russians and Americans because we have communication between our militaries. Well, that's been cut off with China, and President Biden's hoping to get that reinstated when he talks to Xi at APEC. However, Lloyd Austin's right. They only respect when you'll do something at least equal or greater than what they'll do to you, right? They don't respect anything but fear and power.
Mm-hmm.
They don't care about the United States. They don't have any love lost if something happens to the United States. They don't care if, Western civilization collapses. None of that's their interest. Doesn't matter, not going to go there, moving on to where we want to go. So Lloyd's right. We're going to have to go and rub up against their airplanes. We're going to have to
you have to rough them up a little bit. But how he put it is, we may have to bully at 30,000 feet, which is very scary. So it could be, yeah.
We bullied before. We had a drone flying near Iran, and Iran put up some F-4 Phantoms to come up and take a look at the drone, and they were about to shoot it down. And we had a couple F-22 Raptors in the air, and so they didn't see the Raptors coming. We came in behind them, below them, checked out all their ordnance from underneath their planes. So our pilots hung out between their F-4 Phantoms, checking out exactly which weapons they had, which stations on the airplane, reported that back. Then they came out beside these F-4s and crossed in front of them, got their attention right, then got on their radio, because there's an emergency channel, and said, maybe you guys want to go home. And they peeled off and went home. So that's
Good
what
for
it
them.
is. That's how you rub people, right?
Yep.
We might have to start doing that with China.
Yeah. Or will China take that as an aggression?
Well, of course, everything you do with China is going to be aggression. Everything you do with China, they're not going to be happy with. That is just a political stance. We have to get okay with that internally. that that's going to be the automatic response from China, no matter what it is.
Mm-hmm. William, do you have anything else? We're on the hour, and
I've got a bunch of other stuff like CIA director. Let me find his name. Anyway, he's gone to Ukraine to talk to Zelensky.
mm-hmm.
Director Burns. So something's going on there in Ukraine. We ought to keep our eyes on Director Burns from the CIA because something important's happening there. Don't know what it is. We're not going to know probably for a little while, but it's probably something important if the director of the CIA has made the trip. That's about what I have, Elly, for right now. I got a bunch of other lighter stories.
But I think we covered
we're
it.
Out of time.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're out of time for now.
Yeah.
I'll have to take some of it to Monday.
Yeah, and of course, some of the little things I have, I can move till for tomorrow, because I got the Thursday news show. So what I didn't get to today, there was a thing with Guam. I'll get that to tomorrow. But me and William, thank you for watching, and we appreciate your support. We went I think, all the way around the world, and if that gentleman in Pakistan would maybe give us a report of what he's hearing of the story we did in Pakistan. Pakistan is so censored. They don't, everything that gets out is jumbled up or untrue or half truths. So I'll see what he knows. And William, you're the hostess with the mostess, is what I say with William.
So Africa right now is dark as far as news. If somebody in Africa, especially Central Africa, can get information to us, we'd really be thankful.
Yeah.
And we'll put it up.
Yeah.
If we see it as factual and reasonable, we'll share it. So if you're in Africa, if you're in Asia,
anywhere with the news, if you got
anywhere,
privy,
we want to hear from you.
That's our sources do the same thing.
If you're in Venezuela, we want to hear from you. If you're, down in Argentina or
Mexico,
over in Peru, yeah, please. Anybody that has information that they want to get on the program, we're willing to share it if it's real, and
we'll give you the credit for it.
Right. So thanks, Elly, for the opportunity to help people understand what's going on in the world around us.
And subscribe and share this show. World War III is very informative if you are looking at what's going on around the world with war. And so subscribe and hit that like button and ring the bell. I will see you tomorrow. And William, boy, rest up for the next couple days. I'm feeling pretty good, and we're gonna sail along on the information highway at Investigator News. Thank you all for watching.